Oh, there it is. Hello, everybody. This is DV Digital Hero again. I said I was going to make at least another one of these videos. I still might do the other one. But here's the thing. Here's the video of me talking about the crazy, silly ideas I've been having for the past 10 years-ish. It's definitely been more concise, and I've been trying to get it down for the last 3 years. Mostly this last year, I finally condensed it into something that kind of makes sense a little bit, but it's still crazy and it still requires a lot of work to be done. So I'll go through the process throughout the entirety of the process here. I'll even talk about what it's been from the get-go. So yeah, let's just start from the actual beginning. Yeah, before YouTube, because even when I was doing YouTube, the closest thing I had to any kind of story I was going to try to tell was DV in the digital world, or whatever that was. I forget what it was at the moment, but Legendary Gamer DV. That was it. That's what I called it. It was just this little thing of DV going from game to game and all that stuff, and it was kind of a silly idea. But technically, before any of the let's go back before that. I've had ideas for superheroes ever since I was tiny, thanks to my brother. Both of them, technically. I think both of them kind of helped me kind of flesh this out. As a child, it started off with DV, and then I eventually got to DV. I'm going to do this over here. Doom Phantom, who is now probably Jet. Honestly, because Doom Phantom, I think, was going to be a thief-like character, platforming character, but now it's switched over to Jet, who's more like Metal Gear Solid Snake. DV's my main character. He's basically, your Mary Sue, whatever. As much as people hate that trope, it's used as a normal thing. It's basically me. It's kind of a self-insert, but also technically, so all of these characters are part of my personality at this point. I'll get to why that is later in this equation. But the but yeah, started off with DV, Doom Phantom, Magica, who is now Crystal, or who became Crystal, but now it was Angie or Angel. I think it was Angel. Angel was supposed to fill that role for a while, but the person that made Angel just decided that character just not exist. We never roleplayed that. It was everybody else. I never got to actually find out what DV was actually like during that process when we get to it later. And now it's technically Lynn who fills that role. So it's always the role of DV's girlfriend, basically. Which is actually played by, at the times, of my partner. And to be fair, now that I know some things about me, it can be girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, it don't matter. But love interest was the third character. I like the name Crystal. Then I had a guy named Killer, and realized really quick that would be a terrible name for a superhero show. Not because it's actually a bad. One, it's just a simple thing, and two, the actual thing is it would be at a point when I was 9, I think I realized, wait, this might be too graphic, just calling somebody Killer. So again, it's now I realize also on top of that, it's a nothing name. It's just a name of somebody who kills people, but still. So I switched his name over to Luke. And his premise, okay, so I forgot to mention Magica's premise / Crystal's was that she was supposed to be the RPG character. She was supposed to be your typical spellcasting character, while DV was supposed to play your typical Zelda character. these things have kind of changed around, but yeah. I'm just going to go through this whole process, this whole history. This is how I decided to go this. Anyway, and we had Rose, who was my first person shooter character. And she was basically that. And then we had like a whole bunch of other characters because there was like a whole DB Fighting Force base. And honestly, I focused on those 5 throughout 90% of my childhood. But like the other characters with that, we had like Fastball, Picture Taker, other stuff. My brother helped me come up with the names. And like just we just had like basic superhero code names because my oldest brother, really likes shows like G.I. Joe and other stuff like that. It's like classic cartoons, G.I. Joes, Transformers, stuff like that. To the point where we have RPG books of those over there now. Which that's going to be part. I'm going to try to turn all those RPG books into simple games too. At the end of that, I might actually have some questions I might have to throw out into the thing, but yeah, I'm trying to get answers for those now outside of this because this is just a introduction to my madness. Okay, so we had that. I started with that. Basically put that on the back burner forever. I wanted to make a game about it, but I didn't know how to make a game about it. Around like 2008, 2009, I got a hold of RPG Maker, was able to start messing around with it, like just VX. I started messing around with it. Learned a lot about it. Used it for a class project one time. Had a game that was like, let's go in the burner and say it was 80% done. It was a simple 4-dungeon game where like you did a few things and like you went like around this whole thing, and it was basically just this kid trying to find his cat. The kid was a random guy. It was a random kid. And he went around and he basically picked up like new baseball bats, new stuff, basic, typical stuff. And like it wasn't that hard of a game. I flubbed up the ending because it was a stadium, and I wanted to do a stadium right because I've been to stadiums before for like racing events. My parents dragged me to a lot of stadium events. I didn't really want to go, but I got dragged to it a lot. Also, as a person that also went through football because I didn't want to go to, I also learned a lot about stadiums that way. So I tried to use that knowledge, and I kind of flubbed the ending. I never actually finished the game. This is probably a thing that's like a constant, which I hate, but whatever. That was back in 2010. I had that game 80% done. Never finished it. Was probably thinking of just having it like be like super depth. I also wanted to have like an actual level gimmick to it and actually some stages to it. But it was just been like a straight. The best I could have probably done was a straight shot, and then I lost the files. So, and then I also had another game where I was actually tweaking around with like a game with no RPG combat, using RPG Maker, which was kind of working. But again, that one had the exact same fate because they both got lost at the exact same time. My cat, who is in the other room, because it's cold outside because it's the middle of winter in America. I'm just saying that because it's funny, by the way. And yeah, I was working on the game. I had a cup of Kool-Aid next to me. I was working on this game. This game was going to be based on some stuff, like some basic stuff that me and my ex were making. This was the start of that. I will go into more of that story in a minute. But basically that. And then also we started another show. But anyway, so the cat, I had a cup of Kool-Aid next to my computer. I was working on the floor because we were poor. We didn't have much. But I didn't care because as long as we were alive and healthy, I didn't care. I was just willing to live with whatever. So, we found ways to make the floor moderately comfortable, but then the cat knocked the Kool-Aid over and destroyed the computer. So I lost my old laptop that had all my old data and a lot of other stuff and some old games of mine too. But, moving on, around the exact same time, we also started doing this show called it was like the Gamer's Labyrinth. It was like a little short-lived show. It was on a separate channel, and that channel was gone. I don't know where that channel went. I think we deleted it. It might still be there, but it's like so destroyed by the algorithm that it's basically gone. Or we literally deleted all the videos off it and I cannot find it anymore. But we had a show called Legendary Gamer, and then we tried to make, or no, that's the Gamer's Labyrinth, and then I think we erased that. I think we did delete that, and then we tried to make another show that was about like more about Jet, because my ex's favorite character was Jet. So I got to learn a lot more about Jet and his personality than the main character, Devi, which is where I'm still struggling today. I don't know this guy's personality besides my own, and I don't really know my own personality. Let's be real. Like, at least in the form of, like, what I would do in certain situations, which is why I want to do role-playing stuff, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Anyway, so we try to do this through videos, but by the end of the day, what ended up actually happening was that me and my ex got into a pattern of daily IRL role-playing of the characters every day. We would swap characters. We would plan out stories. We would sometimes hop out of the story and be like, hold up, wait a minute. What if we did this? What if we did that? What if we did this? What if we did that? It would kind of spiral from that. It would go into this like spiral of like just different characters, different stuff. We had like 7 years of plots figured out that had involved things like multiple planets. All right, I think the problem is I think my camera's on the other side this time compared to what it was last time. We had different places, so that's why I'm over here trying to get on the camera, but the camera's actually over here now, so I have it flipped the other way for some reason. I could flip it, but we're already halfway through this video. Then that part will make it go upside down, which we do not want to do. I'm hoping this video is freaking properly sideways when I upload it to YouTube. So we had daily role plays. The stories we had multiple planets. We had like 4 major planets that we had, and plus a 5th bonus planet that was like the enemy home world. But it wasn't actually the enemy home world. It was actually like a base of the enemy. And their actual home world was much deeper in the galaxy. And like all this stuff. So on a planet that like actually had my last name, or at least most of it. So I thought that'd be cool. Now I say what it is because we're not using it anymore, so I'm not doing that unless that plot line actually comes in. But I have to actually ask more than one person about that and find out that's the case. It could also just be called Doom World, since the villain's army is called the Dooms. Oh yeah, that's also a thing I had established back in childhood, is that they had King Doom and King Omega Doom. They were supposed to be the same person. It was like you beat up King Doom, and he digivolved into King Omega Doom. Not actually digivolve, but he would like go into his final form, and it would be King Omega Doom, and he would be much stronger and stuff like that. My brother actually made a plot to a game that could be around that stuff. I don't know what he ever did with that. Like my middle brother, the one that's older than me, but not older than my oldest brother. Like older than me, but younger than my oldest brother. He had made like a whole game where King Omega Doom was going to be the final boss, and he really liked the name King Omega Doom because he would be like King Omega Doom. He liked doing that. It was fun. I don't blame him. It is a fun thing to do. I still remember it to this day. That was like almost 20 years ago at this point, but yeah. For the King Omega Doom thing. But yeah, he had a game. It was going to play like Disgaea. I still don't know how to make a Disgaea. I know how to make a tactical game on RPG Maker. So maybe I could possibly do something, but his like thing was gonna have like wrestling moves and all this other shit, and it's like, okay, I don't think I can do that yet. I don't know how to do that shit. I don't know how to make the things interact with each other in a meaningful way to move them around. Ooh, sorry, it's late. I probably should be going to bed, but I wanted to do this, man. I wanted to talk about this stuff. Anyway, we had multiple planets. We had the main planets were like Nufia, which was like the main cast of heroes with Deviant Jet and Midnight. Where Midnight wasn't even my character originally, but now she is because of just talks after that whole thing was done. I got to keep Midnight, which is cool. Which technically I did have a character that was like Midnight, so I get to just combine that with the actual Midnight. So cool. Anyway, then we had Narzia, which was basically your supernatural world. A lot based off supernatural and stuff, but because my ex was super edgy, we usually stuck with like the demons and the angel. Like they had this little mansion. It was kind of cool. And it was like that. And then there was also like the hunters and stuff like that. Basically, again, very supernaturally. I think we even tried to play that off into like a whole thing on Facebook for like a few seconds. I don't know where that went. It's probably gone now because the old account's probably gone. Regardless, anyway. Then we had Furry Planet and Jagra, which was like all like either humans and like furry characters, or halfway in betweens. And I think Cathawania actually was the fourth planet. I think we just had 3 planets. I think we had 3 planets, and Cathawania was actually the 4th planet. And that was the one I thought was like the secret 5th planet, but no, it's actually the 4th planet. And that was just Jack and Dexter's world, like from Jack 2. That was just the Jack 2 world, more or less. Like, no whole bar. That was just a world where there was like one big city, lots of elf-like people, and it was overtaken by the Dooms, and the Dooms were ruling it. Basically, that was the whole thing there. Like, yeah, we were going to use like, yeah, and we had like all these different games assigned to each of these different places. A lot of your more normal games would go to Nufia. A lot of your more furry games would go to Jagra. Spooky horror games would go to Narzia. And like anything that was Star Wars or whatever related would go to Cathawania. And then we had a whole space, and then eventually it got to a space arc, and multiple timelines started getting involved. And like we had a couple different timelines where we're like, oh yeah, we had this timeline, that timeline, because like certain things. And then we said like, and then we had like this place where the DV fighting force had found like a space school. Like when they didn't find it, they made it, and they were going to actually have it to where their next generation was going to be that. But before they actually did that, they had to take care of a threat that I was technically borrowing, but we were reworking it from my middle brother, but we were going to rework it. But you know what? It's all thrown away anyway, so it doesn't matter. If my middle brother actually helps me with some of this creative ideas, because he's still working on a book that's still based off all this stuff, then heck, I'll work with it. Whatever. I'd like to work with both my brothers on using their superheroes and stuff. I'm trying to convince my oldest brother to dabble into his superheroes and stuff for some of these stories, so that way I can make games of them. But it would take a moment. Either way, regardless of anything, the point I'm trying to make is that and then at the very end of it all, the hero's going to get flung in the past, because there's going to be like this wall where like the year 2015, even though we were like past that, but like we started the story in 2012, and like every planet had like a different year because that made sense. So like each planet having different closest relationship to the sun, and what time their civilization actually got founded, and blah 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 blah. So what ended up happening was that there was like this ultimate being that basically became a time thing, and then also one of uh, my ex's characters ended up being the thing that like started controlling the ultimate being, and this like time thing and all this other stuff. And eventually we would get to it, we would stop it, and we basically summarized and role played all of that except for a lot of the minor bits, which we needed to go back into and refine. But before we could go back and refine it, guess what happens? We broke up. So we never got all that stuff gone. I did get like 2 games I had almost ready, or like 2 games partially done during it. No, 3 games technically. The mining game, which was just a random throwaway thing that I made just to be random, which even though it's my first game, I'm not super proud of it, but it's done. So that game was like 99% done. I added some final levels, some final bits for the characters and stuff like that, so they could actually like stop hating each other toward the end and stop being like antagonistic. That was all just done off the top of my head. It's decent, but it's like weird, and everyone who's played it has complained about not understanding the combat system or like the card system. It's like fair, I guess, but whatever. So I'm stepping away from that mostly. The second game I have almost done is the one that I have. It was originally based off Hybrid Heaven. Breakdown. Hybrid Heaven, Breakdown, Half-Life, the first one, and mostly those 3 games, actually, and a hint of Metroid Fusion. I was using a little bit of Metroid Fusion, but I don't know where I'm going to put the actual Metroid games in its equations. I'm not sure if I'm still using inspiration from that, but you'll see in some of the levels that there's a little bit of inspiration from that. And the thing is that right now, that game is about 2 zones long. I'm gonna say it's 4 zones, but technically it was 2 zones. It was 2 of like 10, 15, like however long Half-Life was. I only got to using content of the second area of Half-Life. I barely used any content from Breakdown. I definitely did. I only got to like chapter 2 of Hybrid Heaven, but I'm shortening it down so that way it's actually like palatable, and it's just like a starting spot for that. Because right now I'm using multiple timelines again. This time so that we could tell stories where characters may or may not be able to actually die, and their death is permanent, and stuff like that. And in this case, what it would be is that like in the timeline for that story, DV is just a random guy who tried to go in to get a thing, and like who tried to just go do an experiment to get some money to try to maybe support his game development stuff. Probably something I would actually do if there was actually a chance for money. You know, whatever. Like some way of getting money so I can actually get my games out there. They import dragon genes into them or something of similar stuff. And he now has to escape from a dangerous lab. And that's the plot. That's the entire plot. And honestly, I think that could be done within the 4 levels, the little section I got. Now, that's the story of it now. Originally, it was a completely different character going through a whole lab that wasn't even something we'd actually wrote out yet, which was funny in the hindsight, that we had like 30 different things we wrote out. But the thing we started with was not one of them. We wanted to go a little bit before that to show this character off. But thinking about it, that was a terrible idea. We should not try to do that. I should just try to make a game based around the stuff we actually roleplayed. Which, again, was missing a lot of stuff. But, I could have either filled in the gaps or the gaps never needed to be filled up in the first place. But anyway, should have, would have, could have, did not. Anyway, other thing. Where am I in this process? Okay, so that game was there, that game, and then I have a game about like that was supposed to be based on .hack. It's like a digital thing, but honestly, it makes for such a medieval game that I'm just going to use it for probably a role play based on the first Hero Quest campaign, like the main Hero Quest campaign, the one we technically did 2 streams of already, but it was a little bit different. But I mean, I like not that campaign particularly, but like just mine and my brother's actual first go at it. Probably using Tyrizia as a backdrop and figuring out what other games could actually be a part of that to actually kind of build something alongside of it. Because the whole point of how I'm doing it now, and this is where we're finally getting into what I'm actually trying to do. The whole I combine like 3 or 4 games together thing is kind of what I'm trying to do, but it's complicated. And here's why it's complicated. So, and this is technically something I've been trying to figure out for the last several years, or at least like last few years, trying to figure this out, because this part bugs the heck out of me why I haven't actually done any actual development. Because I have no levels to I have like no idea for levels, like individual levels. I have nothing. Why they go there, what they're doing, what the small inconveniences are, what the traps are they have to go through, why the traps are there. Stuff of that nature. I have no idea why. And I think why is a fun question to have when doing this stuff. Like what they're trying to accomplish. Do the characters succeed in the trap, or do they fail? Or should I leave that to the player's discretion? I think an RPG game, honestly, depending on the situation, some can be obstacles the player can deal with, and some can be actual moments in time where something major happens, like a character getting hurt or something like that. Which is why these last, like, ever since forever, I thought, like, I've been collecting these D&D books for like the past few years, and I've been thinking like here, I'll get like a couple of the like random ones here. I showed a couple. Oh no, I didn't show these yet. Or maybe I did. I think I showed a couple in the last video. I don't know. There's 2 takes of the last video, but I got like stuff like this. I got like all the... Basically, for the most part, I have all of the D&D 5e campaigns. I also, I believe, currently have all of the... whatever that company is called that does the G.I. Joe and... Renegade. I think they're called Renegade. They have like Renegade on the thing. If I'm mistaken, I'm mistaken, but I believe they're called Renegade. Anyway, I have Renegade. I have like all those, which is G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, Transformers, and Power Rangers. They each had like 3 campaigns, except for the Pony one had a 4th campaign. So it's like 13 campaign books on top of the already 13th. What I was trying to do. Ooh, here, see it. On top of the already 30 actual 5th edition books. On top of 2 full super level 1 to level 17 like Pathfinder campaigns. Rise of the Rune Lords and Curse of the Crimson Throne or something like that. I don't remember the name. I also have this bonus book, which I will go through the effort to show. This thing is a fan book, but it is huge. Look at this behemoth. That's a behemoth. That's a 1 to 15 campaign. Half of these are 1 to 15 campaigns. So, stuff I've been trying to figure out is if I want to use multiple books, how do I do that? Do I have the characters go back to level 1? Do I have them go back? Because in order to complete a book, they have to be like level 12 to complete the book. For one story, they have to be like, anyway, they have to be like level 12 to complete the book, and then on top of that, they have to be like level 15, you know. Like, and then the next book, they like basically have a cakewalk and reach like level 20, like 2 books, you know, which is max level in D&D. Wouldn't be a big deal, except that's the max level of D&D, plus like a 10 level prestige. So what I've come up with is this. This is my technicalities for all of this. For at least that part. For the prime timeline, which is the timeline where like my characters have been like, are like as normal as they can be. As like whatever they're supposed to be, they can be. DV has a little bit of his digital powers and also dragon powers. Dragon powers are just consistent, mostly because I really like the Breath of Fire series. I like a lot of series, honestly, but as far as like I feel DV would fit with the Breath of Fire series the most, so yeah, being able to like randomly transform into a dragon and use that was something that we were technically kind of playing around with in the with my ex, but I kind of want to keep that because it's really cool. Just having them be like bigger and buffer dragons, you know, actually sounds kind of cool. There's 5 Breath of Fire games, so there's 5 timelines, and that includes, and we're not counting 6 because that's a mobile game that's delisted, doesn't exist. It literally doesn't exist, so I'm not counting it. If it ever comes back in some way or form, maybe I'll count it, but until then, I'm not. Or if Capcom actually decides to care about its franchises, which will never happen. But anyway, if it does, maybe. Still got Mega Man on the damn moon in Legends 2, but anyway, off tangents entirely. So what I want to do is for the prime timeline is Breath of Fire 3. I'm going to use this as the biggest simplification I can, more or less. The Breath of Fire series is the reason why we have 5 timelines. But yeah, Breath of Fire 3 is timeline 1, and that is the prime timeline. In the prime timeline, the books I literally have beside me, which is why they're here, and like the rest of my books are over there. I'll show you, but the last time I tried to show the books, I accidentally ended the video. I don't want to do that again, because I don't want to have to put 2 videos together, or put like a part 1, part 2. This one might have to be split into multiple parts, but that is a maybe. Anyway, these 10 books here, I'm going to have the characters slowly grow through all 10 of them as if they were like one big massive campaign that gets the characters roughly to level 20 at the end. And by that point, it's like, well, cool, they're level 20. They're like max level or really close to max level because again, they can get to level 30. So I might have them be like 5, like level 15 normal and 5 levels in prestige. Because you go to prestige. With these D&D levels, I've also had the thought of like, okay, well, how am I going to do stats? How am I going to do this? I've had 3 different ideas for stats. One was a normal one. The first one was actually a concept that I had come up with a long time ago with my ex, where we would do, like every time they gained a level, they would get 10 stat points, and they would slowly build up the stats that way. At the end of the day, I'm not going to go with that method, because even though it kind of fits my style better, it has a couple flaws. The biggest one being that if we get to like level 100, and like let's say we get to level 100 and we start off the thing with like 100 stat points, so that way each thing can have like, because I have 8 stats: health, energy, strength, which is melee attack, energy is MP, health is self-explanatory, strength is melee attack, skill is mostly range attacks, wisdom is magic attacks, intelligence is still up to debate, honestly. There's no defensive stats because we could literally use the systems from some games like Zelda, like I've always been declined. I've always been inclined to say stuff like what Zelda does, or like the old Zelda, and what like Ratchet and Clank does is almost better. I'd rather have higher hit points and a defense that's like this reduces 30% of damage, or 60% of damage, or 80% of damage, over having a defense stat that's just like, okay, bigger means good, but what does it actually mean? Like, as a player of RPGs, I am a jerk. I usually go for hiring my attack more so than hiring my defense. If you play most RPGs, it doesn't matter because you just you do both as you progress in the game. You obviously want whatever the better stuff is, but it's like when you have the choice of like an accessory that either boost up your attack or boost up your defense, what are you gonna want? I want to hit things harder. That's what I want. I want things to die faster. I want things to explode harder. That's it. That's what I want. I want to deal more damage. Defense ain't gonna do that. Magic defense ain't gonna do that. Heck, booting them up only basically prevents me from getting one shot by certain enemies in late game. And that's about the biggest thing. It's like in a lot of Final Fantasies, you end up just getting like no matter what, you're gonna get like one shotted by most of things anyway, unless your defense is like ridiculously high, and then maybe you won't. Or if you got Shell and Protect. Or which by the end of those games I just do anyway. And again, by the end of those games, it don't matter because you would obviously be going after the best armor at some point throughout the game and equipping it, or at least like the best you can buy or find normally without having to go on 6 hours of side questing, etc. But yeah, that's my point. I don't like defense or magic defense. I never liked that as a stat, so I don't have that stat. So intelligence, my biggest crutch with it is it's supposed to be for like smart things. I guess I'm not very smart because I can't think of many things to do that. I can come up with like first aid. I can come up with like maybe crafting things, but that would be its own system. And that also, how would I be? I have to find a way to actually tie that to the number on intelligence and not just like this character can do that. I mean, I could do that. I've also thought about like, music could also be a good one for that. Like, doodle, like knowing how to play music would be good for that. Just there's certain things that work with intelligence, but then there's like for every other character, how do you use it? There's talking. I have a charm stat, but it's mostly the luck stat. It's basically like the stash stat from Mario and Luigi games, where the more you raise that up, the more, actually, just the more lucky you are. That's it. It's just a luck stat. That's all it is. I could use the intelligence as a, like, for talking moves. Like, if you want to, like, talk down somebody and, like, damage them in a way that's, like, instead of physical, you're hurting their willpower, which still does damage. Could do that. That is an option. There's so many other things I can do. There's also just, like, locking certain things behind intelligence. Maybe I can lock abilities behind intelligence. Maybe I could do that. But the thing is, depending on how you build up intelligence, like, in most of my games, I'm just going to have, like, the stats, like, level 1 to level 100. There's no other issue about that. It's just good. The stats are going to go up. And, like, the stats go up normally. Like, the only thing that you'd be able to do to influence the stat going up any higher would be putting on a certain outfit or putting on something else. It's like, there's not much you could do about that. And outside of, like, first aid and a few other things, that was really hard to come up with, like, skills to do that. Again, talkie skills might be able to damage willpower or, like, almost, like, weird debuffy skills might be the best bet for that. But I have to actually come up with those type of skills. Almost like your tail wag, but it actually does, like, from Pokemon, but it actually does damage. More or less. not only does it lower defense, but it also deals like your intelligence and damage. And then like very powerful versions of that would be that. My biggest gripe right now is actually figuring out skills. There's also the checks from D&D and certain things like that, like your little rolly checks. But again, that's going to be handled outside of the video games, and honestly, yeah, that's handled outside of the video games. So, anyway, long story short on that is that those are those stats, and then I had speed and charm. Again, the stats. The speed is just turn order. That's all it does. If these stats can technically be transformed into other games, like technically strength, wisdom, and skill can easily be transformed to other games. You have a melee attack button, you have a range attack button, and you have a magic attack button. You just do this, and depending on how big the numbers are for those games, you could do a number of damage. If the stat numbers are the exact same, like I can actually figure out how to just make a Kingdom Hearts style game, either side scroller or 3D, that just uses my same exact numbers from RPG Maker. Cool. What I got right now as far as the stat system is, like, I had that stat system I came up with, and then I've switched over. I've been back and forth again a bunch, but right now I'm kind of on using the D&D stats, and then or the Fallout stats. We have the Fallout RPG over there too. We have like 3 campaigns for that, so that's also a thing. Anyway, also technically I can go back to the actual timelines because I just remembered that was what I was talking about. But anyway, the stats right now are the D&D stats times 10, with level 1 being cut in half. So basically it looks like 8, 6, 7, stuff like that. Those type of numbers. Maybe 5. Maybe even as low as 4. Like that type of numbers. And then times 20. Basically. So again, Fallout's a good example because the numbers don't go up to higher than 12. You can go up to about higher than 20 on D&D if you've got certain builds. And the thing lets you. I've not seen it because I can't get a group of people to play D&D, which is my entire problem right now. I can't do anything. My brother will play with me sometimes, but he's usually busy with work. Lynn, also busy with work, doesn't live with me, lives 4 towns away. Kind of a problem. And people online, well, nobody really wants to do any of the stat building stuff. They really just leave that to me. I got one person I'm technically doing a campaign with, but I honestly don't know if they're actually doing the campaign or just doing whatever they want. And like having the campaign technically in the background. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that the other time, so right now that's the stats idea. Like, it's an easy mix. Intelligence and wisdom might be swapped depending on which one's actually the magic stat, because depending on your class, that actually changes. Same with charisma. That also might change that. But I also might just keep that, depending on if I at least have a good one of these to compensate for that character being able to use magic. You know. Strength is already there. Dexterity is mostly used for range attacks, but it's also your armor class and sometimes used for regular attacks. But mostly it's used for that. So I can just make that thing. And also, anytime the characters just use a melee attack, they can still use their strength in the video games while using their dex in D&D to give them an advantage so they do more damage. But in an RPG, they're already going to be they're going to have a higher chance to hit and have to hit more often because bigger health bars. Also, as far as health goes, I'm putting it like, if you start off with like 8 hit points, that becomes 80 hit points starting off with, and then up that by like 20. Right now, I've also added an additional 10 levels just in case I decide to actually do. Just this one's just in case I decide to do like, um, say for the games, the ones I mentioned for the Prime timeline, where I'm going to actually combine all that into one super campaign. That's going to go on for a long time, and cut that into 10 different games, more or less. If those games all go from level 1 to level 99, then what I'll probably do is have it to where you have an additional 10 bonus levels that have nothing to do with anything, that just give your stats that. So it's like, again, if you start off with like 8, it'd be like 8 to 80, basically. Easiest way to explain it, because it's half of your D&D stat to 5 times your D&D stat, so 8 to 80. And then anytime you gain a level, when you start off at level 1, so it'd be 8 to 88, it would go up by one of the multipliers to the 8, or a half a multiplier to a full D&D stat. Fallout stats, like I said, are just very similar to the half stat, so it's like, I could be like Fallout stats times, basically times whatever your current level is, plus 10 is your max level. And this just gives you an additional, just gives you like an additional like 80s to a stat or whatever. It's fine. Like at the end of the day, if you actually reach all the way to level 40 or level 30, you'd have 40 times, which would basically be 20 times your D&D stat, which would look something like you start with 8 and end with 80, 160, 240, 320. You end with a stat of 320 plus whatever your armor gives you. Armor, I'm wanting to use like I've seen in like the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games, where like some armors give you a boost to the like all these stats, and then to take waste boosts of it. And basically, what I'm going to do is have it to where casual clothes. Basically, the clothes are going to take a stat block from D&D. This one's like really easy. I can just show. The basic, most common clothes, like your everyday street clothes, no matter what time period you're in, would have the commoner stat block, which you can see is pure 10s across the board, and with a 4 hit point boost, so 40 additional health. And also, since the maximum is a D8, we'll go with since MP is actually like really hard to come by in D&D because it doesn't use an MP system, it uses spells per day. But we're going to ignore that and say that since it says over there that it has a D8, it's a possibility of max. So what I'm going to do is for MP is take the maximum and minus the current, like the recommended hit point value, and make that the MP value. So in this case, it's also 4. And then times those both by 10, so it's like 40 health, 40 MP, and 10 stats across the board. And you come over here, and let's see if I can find a better example. Maybe the Berserker stats. This one has an intelligence minus of like a 9 intelligence and a 9 charisma. So these two stats are actually less than that, but you also get the higher boost of strength and all that stuff. It's not like super massive because at the end of the day, we're talking like a difference between like 300 versus like 300 stats at the end of the entire everyone's campaign versus like a maximum like plus 30, plus 50 if I use Pathfinder. But we get like 67 hit points and whatever the maximum minus 67 would be. So I'm not doing that math right now. That's why I'm not doing that math. For the so you just get like a ton of you get like instead of 40, you now have 600 hit points now. So you can have like almost up to like 3,000 hit points with just the armor alone. So the armor is actually always growing, but like it just has this like little ebb and flow of like what stats it boosts up and down. So I could have like the number, the HP is fine, but I could have like the stat numbers go up a little bit higher or lower. But I do have to keep in mind, specifically for RPG Maker, is that you cannot go above 1,000 points on a stat. Not allowed. You cannot have a stat go above 1,000. Unless they change that in MZ, and I haven't seen it, but I know in MV and I know in VXAs, you cannot go above 1,000 points. Even if it looks like you can, even if it tries to, the stat numbers will not reflect this. Damage output is like capped at that. Although you can have to do more than 900 damage or 1,000 damage, stats will not reflect this. But I mean, you can, because you can have like 100 times 20, and that does like 2,000 damage. Or you can have an attack that's like 200 damage times 9,000. You can just do all types of crazy damage. That part's not a problem. An enemy AP can go crazy. Their stats also can't go that crazy, but you see the point. The point I am trying to make is that I can't go above 1,000, and this is with equipment, this is with buffs, this is with everything. Even buffs can't get you above 900 or 1,000 stats points. Or 9,999 hit points. You cannot buff over. You cannot over buff. There are some things you probably can use to go over the limit. I know in VX Acer is definitely one, because I had it for a second. But I'd rather just use the vanilla stuff if I can, unless somebody gives me, unless I can find the good ones. And I know that I can just, all I have to do is credit. I had to credit Yamfly for the ones I did with the other one, because it was through the Yamfly thing that I was able to do what I wanted to do. But yeah, skills, combat, all that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, point is that that's how I'm doing the stats now. I may have to verify that later, but that's what I'm doing with the stats right now. Anyway, I forgot to go over the other timeline stuff. I ramble like a mofo, and I hate it, but it's what I do. So here's the other half of that equation. So, the other half of that is I have the other timelines are the digital timeline, which is going to use a lot of those Renegade stories, plus a few other ones. And the idea with that one is those stories are like usually like one, like you like do the whole campaign, you make it like one level, or it's like 1 to 5 or something like that. So basically the premise is I do a lot of those campaigns that have like the lower number values in that one or whatever. I just say each campaign is worth 1 level. Once it's done, the character levels up, gets stronger, and gains new powers. So, I'm also tempted with those stories to not even have the player level up the characters and just have them have that, but maybe have stuff like you found a heart container that gives you like plus 40 health. You found this that gives you this temporary buff. You got this in the story that gives you this temporary buff. All these temporary buffs that don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but are good for that game. The temporary buff means it's good until the end of that game. And then in the next game, you don't have those buffs anymore, and you're at whatever stat you're supposed to be. But in that game, you gained like 30 extra power, 30 additional strength, 200 additional hit points, all this type of stuff. All these different stat boosts, but it does not carry over to the rest of it. But it was a temporary power boost that you needed to power through the bad guys of that campaign. That's how we're looking at that. But also on that note, I'm trying to think. Man, that's the digital nostalgia timeline. Also, that timeline is going to be based around a lot more of my earlier ideas, where it's the DV fighting force and stuff like that. Because I don't know if the Prime timeline is going to have an actual dedicated DV fighting force, but basically the Prime timeline and the nostalgia timeline are very, very close. They're like, what if like one or two things were different, but these ones are very close in power. This one's actually going to be based around the nostalgia timeline is going to actually be Breath of Fire 2. The only other Breath of Fire game I've technically beaten at this point. I beat Breath of Fire 3 and I beat Breath of Fire 2. So those are the two I know the best. Timeline number 3, the zombie timeline. This is where everything has been, because of the events. Like some of the events are technically happening with DV in that one, and some of the events are happening over with Luke and Sheena, as they are like supernatural detectives, like a completely different branch of the detective agency that's going on their own thing, while DV is basically in a lab that basically causes the outbreak of the zombie apocalypse. That's basically your Walking Dead stuff. This would be a Walking Dead timeline, except for the Walking Dead RPG has no plots. There are no campaigns. There's one campaign, and we did it in a day. Not worth it. Barely anything happened. My biggest thing is I don't get a lot of lore books. The reason I don't get a lot of lore books for D&D is because why would I need lore books? I have my own worlds I'm coming up with. The lore books could help me generate ideas, sure, but I'm not using their lore. I'm making up my own lore because a lot of this stuff is modern day. And you don't usually get that in D&D. This is mostly modern day. People have cell phones. People have, guns. AK-47s are a thing. It's modern day. It's almost Earth, except it's not quite Earth because you got furries and half furries running around. If people want me to say that technically this is Earth, if people think that would work, we could go with it. But I think having a fictional world that technically still has a modern world could still be good. Like a fictional world with a modern aesthetic, where we're like anthro furries and like half ones like bird people, like Hawk Girl. You have like anthro furries, like the Sonic characters, and you have like half ones like basically what you'd see like from vampire characters for like bat people, and you have like girls like Hawk Girl with like Hawk Girl from Justice League. You have characters like that intermixed with all this. I think there could be some cool stuff. That's why it's Nufia. But basically, long story short, a lot of these planets are basically just that. It's modern time aesthetic. So I don't need to use the D&D lore. The closest I might need is the deities, because I have a thing where like the deities are a real tangible thing. You can borrow power from them. You can ask them. They do exist, but they're like literally like an opposite to the Dooms. It's like a power struggle between the Dooms and these deities. They're both trying to populate planets and raise and rule them, but one is trying to conquer planets, while the other one is just trying to nurture planets. And technically, not all the Dooms are bad guys. Probably some can be good guys, but because of the way things are, they have to do terrible things, no matter what. It's their culture. So, for the I can fix him crowd or I can fix her crowd, that is possible. That is a possibility. You might be able to fix these characters, but it's not going to be easy. It's been almost an hour. Either A, this video is going to be cut off here in 30 seconds, or B, the video itself is going to stop because it doesn't know how to record longer. I'm not sure which. If we have to make it part 2, we have to make it part 2. I might end up making a part 2 anyway. I might just cut it off here. there's still a lot to go. I still got two more timelines to explore. I didn't even really finish exploring the zombie one. Zombie one, before I go, the zombie one's based off of Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, the game I really hate. I honestly don't like it. Okay, it's still going. Yeah, screw it. This is gonna be a long one. What's the whole thing if you want to know the entirety of my madness? I'm not splitting this up because I ramble forever. It wouldn't change how much I ramble. It's just going to be one longer video. I don't have to upload it twice. It's also why I don't cut the streams down into chunks, is because then I'd have to like upload them every single day to get the same effect as just uploading on like one bulk. I mean, people want me to cut down the streams to more watchable stuff. I could. Or if they want me to make stream montages, maybe I could. But I don't know what the highlights are because nobody tells me what they find funny. But that's beside the point. Anyway, off tangent. I don't like Breath of Fire Dragon Quarters because it's a weird. The tacticalness of the game is fine. I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is with the fact the game wants you to reset it 30 times. I don't want to reset the game 30 times. I want to beat the game in one go. I want to beat the game and do everything I can in one go. That's it. I don't like playing Resident Evil games where like you have to like you see all the stuff and then you're forced to restart because I ran out of herbs. I gotta restart now. My brother's done that several times. I never liked that, and that's why I never played through the Resident Evil games. And why I don't really like games with like limited inventory or stuff like that. I prefer where you can just like, if you have like a limited inventory, it's because your characters do, but you can go buy as many green herbs as you want. Dragon Quest is fine. Earthbound is fine, although annoying. Both of those concepts are annoying, but Resident Evil is even worse. Even though it has like the thing, but you can't when you run out of green herbs on the map because you made one too many mistakes. And Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter is just exactly that, except it's an RPG that at least lasts like about 10 hours on its own on a single run. You have to like do like 10 hours worth of content. I got pretty far one time, and I didn't understand how the dragon meter worked, and I had a permanent loss situation when I rented it because I thought getting it to 100% would have been like a super meter. I thought it was a super meter. I was a kid. When the PS2 was out, I was like 12 to 14. Yeah, it had to be around 12 to 14 because I'm pretty sure I rented this game specifically while I was living in Michigan, which was before I was 14, so. It is a permanent death state if you hit. Not permanent. It's a death state if you hit 100%. I didn't know this. It got to a boss fight where I think you're forced to be the dragon, and because of this, it boosted it above 100%, and I just died. It was game over. It wanted me to restart, and I didn't because it was a rental game, and I didn't want to restart it. Again, kind of a problem. You don't want to restart a game like that. No, that's terrible. But now, because it was a rental, I lost that save file a long time ago. I owned the game. I'll get back to you on that if I still own the game or not. I don't know. I've been selling a bunch of games. It's hard to remember which game. I actually had a copy of the game. Tried to play it for a bit. It got like partway through. But yeah, also that requires me hooking up my PlayStation 2, and I can't do that in my current living situation. And my Elgato, which is somewhere in a box. All that stuff is somewhere in a box. I can't get to it. Anyway, long tangent about that game aside. That game, the whole premise is that you have a monster growing inside of you, and it's trying to come out. And that's why that DV is going to be more like that. There's a powerful monster inside that he can use to really powerhouse do monsters. I'm not going to have the whole once it reaches 100% he dies thing. That's stupid. But, like, it could be slowly killing him. It could be. But there might be ways to fix it. Who knows? That's the whole thing. We're all in the planning stages of that. It might kill him. I don't know. Haven't got that far. Haven't got that far in this new story yet. Haven't got anywhere in this new story yet. The only thing I know is what happens in this one house. Okay. It's the only official thing, and honestly, I don't know if I have to retell that or what, because if I decide to actually record or do whatever with D&D, we might have to do a summary of that one, because that was something we did. Also, anyway, moving on. So that's that timeline. It's mostly a zombie apocalypse. It's supposed to have been The Walking Dead, but The Walking Dead was terrible, so we're just going to use a bunch of D&D campaigns to stop being used for the prime timeline. Like Curse of Strahd. That's a big one. Curse of Strahd, probably Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus, and several other ones like that. Really, really interesting, more supernaturally ones. Prince of the Apocalypse might be on there. Stuff like that. Then the fourth timeline is going to be a Fallout timeline. This is where nuclear extermination destroyed the whole planet. Like Fallout, the video game series. It's actually based on the Fallout D&D thing. This is where I kind of was like, yeah. Technically, if we keep this as one big timeline, first of all, change that DV to somebody else. The DV I mentioned before to somebody else, and to have it be like maybe a different DV. Similar situations for all these DVs, but different people. And if I were to make it one timeline, this was going to be like Xena's story into a world that was just basically ruins. Trying to gather spare parts and stuff to try to fix the ship and leave. That was the general idea I had originally, but then multiple timelines came up, so this is probably just a timeline where they started off in a thing that was going to be a satellite, the bombs hit too soon, and they were trapped for 200 years. Like everybody else in the Fallout universe, basically. Mostly like the character from Fallout 4, mostly. And they were trapped in different ways to make a human character, a robot character. The robot character just didn't age because of robots, like a Mr. Handy. A person that got turned into a ghoul, and a person that got turned into a super mutant. Basically, they all leave, and then they find other characters and stuff. We've role played that part a little bit. We've done some of the Fallout starter kit from the actual thing that did the popper thing. We've done some of that. The only thing we haven't done is finish that. We haven't finished it. So once we finish it, which I've been trying to push for us to do lately, because if we finish it, I can make a game out of it. Like easy. Might make that one based off Mega Man X Command Mission. I don't know why, but that one might actually be the one that fits the most. But it won't be nearly as long as that game. And probably use ideas and stuff from, honestly, Mega Man Zero, honestly. Because I had like a whole thing where each of Xena's stories were going to basically be one of the Mega Man Zero games. Because the robot, Mr. Handy, is Willer. And I've always had ideas that Willer was going to basically be Mega Man. And he's like, I have a Mega Man game, like a Mega Man thing set up for all the timelines. The digital one's probably going to be Battle Network. The Prime one is probably going to be like Mega Man Classic. The zombie one's probably Mega Man X. Also, the digital one's also going to probably have a little bit of ZX in there. Because the Power Rangers, like I told you, that we're using the ones that have the Power Rangers in it. So, ZX is 1,000% Henshin to Go Power Rangers. Also means Beautiful Joe's being used for that one. The fifth timeline is a timeline where time has progressed normally, but the world never evolved technologically. I call it the magic timeline, where magic has basically been so widely used that it surplused technology. Technology was never needed. There's no computers. There's no nothing. But aliens might have came down and tried to force a modern perspective on that world.